Hello and welcome back to 209 Prep Sports. Scott Bryant and Chris Herrera back in the studio. Pretty good week. First week of playoffs. Obviously, all the top four seeds had byes, so that was, I'm sure there were a lot of special guests at their second round, potential opponents. So we were in a position this week to have, a lot of really good football played. I think that it's a lot more equitable than I think people would have thought to start when playoffs got started. I think people expected more blowouts as you usually do the first round, especially trying to fill the bottom end of the bracket. But I felt like the way the scores went this week, that those teams showed up and played well. Seemed like a very everybody got through relatively healthy, and outside of a couple of games, all the favorites won. So I guess if we want to be CIF detractors and give them the business once in a while, we got to give them some credit too for doing a good job with the bracket, with only 2 upsets across 6 divisions, because D7 hasn't started yet. So I don't know if that's saying something or not saying anything, but it lined up pretty well. So as we proceed this week, every bracket's down to 8 teams, and even the D7 bracket, everybody's only got 8 teams left. So this is the quarterfinal round, and so for everybody in the positions that they're in, one more win, they get to the semifinals, and then kind of that starts to narrow down to 4, and then we'll be down to 2 in each division, and before you know it, you'll have a section winner, with everybody in hopes that they'll get the NorCal Bowl game, with hopes that they end up getting to play a state game. So pretty impressive week. We'll just go ahead and start running down the games. Not within within our section, but not within our scope. Nevada Union goes to Wood and loses that game 39-27. Game that we will cover. First, we'll go ahead and cover the Ceres Ripon game. Ceres ends up getting into the playoffs for the first time in quite a while, haven't gotten no real favors done for themselves, got pushed down to go play Ripon right up the road, but pretty good game, it looks like, for all intents and purposes. 25-0 going in at half. Ceres kind of answers the bell in the second half, hanging 13, but then Ripon puts it away, scoring 14 in the fourth quarter. Getting into the scores for this game, you had Landon Hudson, the stats, I'm sorry. Landon Hudson starts the game at quarterback. He's 9 for 23 for 173, 2 touchdowns and a pick. The leading rusher was T. Lee Gill. He had 8 carries for 25 yards and no touchdowns. And then we had Ripon not adding any stats. So pretty good win for Ripon. They'll go ahead and advance to next week, where we'll cover we preview the games for next week at the end of the show. So at that point, Scott, you want to cover our game?
Yeah. So moving down the road a little bit, you had Orastemba traveling to Linden for a pretty good matchup. What looks good, it looked pretty good on paper as a pretty even matchup, 9 versus 8. But by halftime, Linden was getting this game pretty much in hand. You had final score of Linden 42, Orastemba 28. Statistical leaders for Linden, you had Alex Herrera was 14 of 29 for 242 yards. With 3 touchdowns and one interception. Rushing, you had Joe Cowan had 16 carries for 101 yards. He had a long of 26. And then you had Jordan Sherman, 6 carries for 16 yards and a touchdown. And for Orastemba, you had Vincent Lopez with 7 of 14 with a touchdown. And Alex Milan, sophomore, stepping up, 9 of 15 for a touchdown. Unfortunately, threw 3 picks, and that was probably one of the big difference makers in the game, was turnovers. You had rushing. You had Laz King was 26 carries for 161 yards. He had a pretty good night. And then Vincent Lopez had 5 carries, 29 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But again, this is Linden moving on for the first time since, I believe, 2004.
Yes, sir.
In the playoffs. So, yeah, good win for Linden.
Yeah, very good game. Orastemba was tough. We tried to put them away. Probably got a little too conservative in the second half, but they made some good adjustments on us, and to stay within 14, scored a late touchdown, and then we added a scoop and score for a touchdown to put the game away pretty late. So Oristimba was game. Like I said, to lead off the show, I think that the CIF did a pretty good job with the 8 and 9. We were relatively close. So moving right along, you had Inderkum going to Whitney. Whitney shuts them out 35-0. El Camino at Casa Robles. Casa Robles wins this game 51-20 or 51-34. Enox goes to Del Oro. Del Oro wins that game 28-21. The next game we'll cover is Del Campo going to East Union. Del Campo ends up taking it on the chin pretty good in this game. East Union wins that game 51-7. There's a lot there. Del Campo with no stats, but Luke Weaver obviously is the leader in the clubhouse there again. 16.
Yeah, you know that kid's he's gonna put up numbers every time he steps on the field.
Yeah, he was 16 for 25 for 297, 3 touchdowns and a pick for a 127 quarterback rating, almost a 128. Leading rusher was Luke Weaver, 10 for 88 with 2 touchdowns. David Flores added a touchdown on 54 yards rushing, and Jonte Maggard added another touchdown on 24 yards rushing. The leading receiver was Dylan Lee at 4 catches for 126 and a touchdown. Jacob Toast had 3 catches for 76 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Kainoa Ontai had 8 catches for 80 yards, no touchdowns. So a really good game for East Union. East Union, I think for being in that difficult VOL league, they saw just about all of it this season, and so getting into that game was pretty good for them. And then Wood Creek goes to Monterey Trail, and Monterey Trail wins the game 39-23, and Scott's going to go ahead and cover the Chavez-Lincoln game.
Yeah, one more thing on Monterey Trail, and we talked about this last week. We really think they're kind of the sleeper pick in that division, so I see them, they had a good week and see them to do more as they move on. Next game in our area we want to cover, it was really Lincoln all over Chavez. The Trojans scored 56-6. Unfortunately, we didn't get any stats from the Trojans, but just real quick, Luis Rodriguez, senior for Chavez, he was 12 of 28, 113 yards, but unfortunately he turned the ball over 3 times. You had Reuben Hooks scoring the 1 touchdown for Chavez. He had 10 carries, 32 yards, and like I said, he had the solo touchdown for Chavez.
Yeah, I mean, I think that game went pretty much as expected. I don't think anybody saw that going any differently. That Lincoln team, super talented, loses a tight game the week before, late in the game to St. Mary's, so probably a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. They advance this week, but they don't get them, we'll cover it again a little bit later, but they go ahead and get Folsom this week, so going to be a little bit tougher for them. Next game we'll cover, Somerville goes to Waterford. Waterford handles this relatively easily. Waterford puts up 48. Somerville scores 35. Somerville did not enter stats, but Waterford stats, Aaron Adams was 12 for 21 for 174, 3 touchdowns and a pick. He also added 23 carries for 193 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns. And then Caleb Hilton had 12 carries for 92 yards. And Ryan Hilton added 16 carries for 98 yards and a touchdown. The leading receiver was Javier Newsom. He had 8 catches for 141 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then there were only 4 other completions spread out amongst Caleb Hilton, Cale Herod, and Brinkman. So very good win for Waterford. They played a tough Somerville team who had Sonora the week before. So kudos to Waterford for going out and getting the W this week too. So congrats.
Next score we're going to cover, St. Mary's plays McClatchy in a first-round playoff game. It was all St. Mary's, 56-12. Pretty much had this game in hand by halftime, and then just kind of rolled through the rest of the way. St. Mary's leading the way. Cruz Herrera, quarterback, he was 8 of 13, 138 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think those numbers, again, in typical St. Mary's fashion, is tapping the brakes a little bit and keeping the ball on the ground to try to run that clock out. You had, rushing-wise, you had Jaden Marshall had 3 carries, 30 yards, and a touchdown. Samson Hunkin, he had 2 carries, 15 yards, and a touchdown. Asante Carter, sophomore, who we're going to be talking about this kid for the next couple of years. 12 carries, 117 yards, 3 touchdowns. And then Trey Carrito, who's a senior, 1 carry, 59 yards, but that 59-yard carry was also for a touchdown. Receiving, you had Jaden Marshall had UCLA bound. Jaden Marshall had 2 receptions for 24 yards. Jason Calvin had 2 receptions for 40 yards and a touchdown. Is it Nate?
Nas.
Nas Danielson. Yeah, sorry about that, Nas. Nas Danielson, three receptions, 66 yards and a touchdown, getting it done on the receiving side. Defensively, you had Andrew Andrade was all over the place. He had 16 tackles to lead the way for the Rams. Dylan Lozano had 7 tackles. And, as I go through and I read some of these names from St. Mary's, there's whether it's Carrito or Lozano, I can't help but think that they must be related to some of the great St. Mary's players of the past.
Yeah, that I talked to Cruz obviously after the game. McClatchy was in the not so long ago they were one of the I wouldn't say a powerhouse, but they're a very difficult team in the section and fell on hard times and kind of are right in the ship now. So they were a little bit overmatched in the St. Mary's game. St. Mary's probably has one of the best receiving cores in the area. So
absolutely, yeah.
And for them to not have to use them in a game like that, it's pretty good for them. Covering a couple of the other scores that are outside our scope, or Burbank goes to Patterson. Patterson wins that game 38-6. Colfax travels to Woodland. Woodland wins that game 22-19. Rodriguez goes to Christian Brothers. Christian Brothers wins 30-16. Next score we'll go ahead and cover that's within our scope, and we actually talked to Coach Duenas on last Tuesday or Monday when we covered this.
Yeah,
but
this is a big win for the Flames.
Oh, fantastic. And we actually text each other. He texted me congratulations after we'd won, and then I I'd obviously was texting him to congratulate him. But Lodi wins this game at Downey. Downey is an offensive juggernaut, but Lodi, I talked to Duenas, and I think he said they didn't get Downey never even saw the ball for the first quarter, so I don't think they got the ball the first time until like 2 minutes into the second quarter. So
defense by offense.
Yeah, and they just I think they kind of just went on a long drive, made the field goal, and then I think they onside kicked and got it right back. So, go ahead and get up 17-0 at half. Put the with a veer type offense where they're going to manage the clock and things like that. It puts them in a really good spot. Adam Schallberger was 5 for 7 for 58, no touchdowns and a pick, but he added 28 yards rushing on the ground. Bradley Jenkins added 15 carries for 88 yards, and Richard Powell had 26 carries for 50 yards. There were no receiving stats, and it doesn't have the touchdowns in written down on this, so we don't know who scored for Lodi. But for Downey, Connor Stoddard, the MVP of the CCL or CCAL, whatever the league is that they're in, he was 18 for 31 for 204 with a touchdown and 2 picks. The leading rusher was Kamani Ragland. He had 16 carries for 97 yards and 2 touchdowns. Connor Stoddard also added 8 carries for 51 yards, no touchdowns. The leading receiver was Faison Allen. He had 2 catches for 47 yards and a touchdown, and Gavin Garcia added 4 catches for 36 yards.
Kind of running down a few more scores. You had Rosemont defeating Delhi 49-13. Sheldon beats Turlock 36-22. Liberty Ranch out of Galt ends up beating Gustine 42-19. Dixon with the big win, first round playoff victory, beating Ponderosa 29-20. And you had Grace Davis surprisingly falling in the first round, 33-21. And then Elk Grove just all over Grigori, 56-6, which kind of moves us into the next score that we're going to want to cover. Hilmar beats Los Banos 61-27. Just really starts putting some points up on some big points on the board.
Yeah, it's these games. Hilmar. I was going to talk to Coach Santos last week. And, we've just been, all of us trying to get ready for games and stuff. Timing somewhat difficult. And I apologize to Coach Santos. I'll try to get a hold of him should they advance this week. Because I'd really like to get him on his insights and, his just giving us some feedback on how things are going, very honest and forthright. And we really appreciate him being on the show. So I don't know if you want to go ahead and cover those stats now that we're having some technical difficulties.
Yeah, sorry about that. We've got some stats here. We don't have any touchdowns listed, but Jason Pimentel was in at quarterback. He had 4 receptions on 9 attempts, and then you had Brock John Perry 10 carries for 110 yards. Luis Vargas 11 carries for 74 yards. And Jason Pimentel, 11 carries for 115 yards. Receiving wise, ball wasn't in the air very much this night, but it didn't need to be. Luke Cox, Brock Perry, and Luis Vargas were the targets. But really, the storyline here is just the Yellow Jackets having their way with the Tigers. Like I said, we don't have any touchdown statistics, but I'm sure that was spread out pretty well throughout the night.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, Hilmar's Hilmar, and they do what they do, and they're gonna, and all that whole TVL, they're gonna, it's a battle of wills. So, they're just gonna, everybody's going ahead and getting it done. So we'll talk about this week now. We'll kind of preview some of these games. There's 28 games on the calendar, 27 of them being Friday night and one of them being on Saturday. Like we mentioned, the only two upsets, Lodi was one of the upsets, and then who was the other one that we just mentioned at the end of it was Roseville beat Grace Davis. So that was those games are those games kind of, I wouldn't say they turn the bracket on its head, but it puts Lodi's at very, Lodi's a handful. They're not gonna. They didn't wake up Saturday going, "Oh, we're so excited that we won," as much as, "Oh, we better prepare now because now we got Central Catholic." So you have the beast of the valley, and as far as the mid-major schools are concerned, I saw an article. I think it was Cal High did a bowl projection, and they obviously have Central Catholic advancing to a bowl game this season in their bracket. So they're a handful, they're huge up front. They're going to be another team that wants to establish their will running the ball. Lodi is going to try to do the same thing right back to them. So I wouldn't anticipate this being the highest scoring game, but I would anticipate, that it's going to be as physical as they come, and probably one of the best games of the week, I would imagine, in the area. So
yeah, and I tell you what, there are some exciting matchups this week. I mean, when you look at just history of schools and you combine that with current rosters, I mean, there are some really exciting matchups. We get to see Kimball get their first playoff game after a first round bye. They're 9-1. They're taking on Wood, and Nick Coronado, I'm sure, is just itching to get that ball up in the air. Yeah. You're going to see, one of the top quarterbacks in the area, and then you don't have to go you just go down the highway and you're going to see Lincoln and Folsom, both at 7-3. I think this is going to be a great matchup. Again, this goes back to the CIF and how they were kind of predicting the way things are going to play out. But that's going to be a great game. Vacaville, Elk Grove, that's a blast from the past. That's two longtime powerhouses are going to be throwing blows back and forth. I see that as being a great game. And then East Union getting exactly what they want. They want the big school, the big history, and really kind of make some history for themselves. Luke Weaver, look for him to have a big night against Merced, but that's going to be a great matchup as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the VOL teams, again, we go back to them. I think the VOL and the TVL, those teams coming out of those leagues are probably the most prepared for these type of games because they've been in it all season. You don't get a night off in either league, so they're probably the most prepared. Moving right along, the next some of the games outside of our area, Casa Robles takes on Union Mine. Placer gets Vista Del Lago, and then Hilmar and Sonora. These two will match up, and it's not going to be it's not the first time, obviously, they've matched up, and these two are both super physical. They're Hilmar going up the hill to Sonora. And I think they played each other earlier in the season. I believe Hilmar won that game.
And Hilmar's really clicking offensively.
They
obviously, after scoring 61 points in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, I think it's some of these teams, they just kind of seem like they get stronger as the season goes along. I think a lot of teams don't do that. I think, you're nicked up and banged up and you're kind of like pushing everybody to the finish line. But some of these teams just seem like they get stronger and stronger as the season goes along. And so, yeah, earlier in the season, Hilmar did take on Sonora. This was at Hilmar. Hilmar ends up winning that game 28-21. So I would anticipate this game being much like the first one, very close, very well played. Neither one of these teams are going to beat each other. You're going to go ahead and have to beat the other team. Nobody's going to do you any favors on Friday night in that game.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you've got Liberty Ranch heading up the hill to take on a very tough Argonaut team, a team that's very tough to beat at home. Houston is going to end up playing Rosemont. Rosemont's 9-2. Houston's at 7-3, but don't let that record fool you. Houston is really last few games they've really been coming along. They've got that sophomore quarterback that really has changed the dynamic for them. And then kind of a little bit outside of our purview, Christian Brothers takes on Lincoln of Lincoln. And then Esparto, school that you guys have played this year at 5-3, is playing Delta at 7-3. And then Waterford. This is an interesting matchup. Waterford at 10-1 is playing Livingston. Livingston's quarterback, we've talked about him a lot, Baptista. He's the real deal. I see this as being a high-scoring game. I think you'll see a lot of points on the board, put on the board by both teams, but that's one of those pick'em games. I think even with Waterford at 10-1, I still think Livingston's going to be right there with them.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the same thing. Playing the VOL. I mean, you're playing Escalon, and you're playing Houston, and you're playing Hillmar, and you're playing Ripon, and so 5 teams going. Houston, 5 teams going to the playoffs out of your league. Waterford. In a smaller, and playing in a smaller division. This is probably the toughest game they will have played this year. The loss that they took was to Mariposa County. I don't think that they anticipated losing that game. So, and Livingston, Rockland Batista, he picked up multiple offers this last couple of weeks to some schools. I can't remember exactly which ones they were, but, pretty impressive for him. They're putting Livingston kind of back on the map. Livingston's a bigger school than Waterford, but as far as the level of play, I think that should be a really tight game. I think it's going to be a high scoring game, like you mentioned. But I do anticipate both quarterbacks kind of having a pretty big night. Livingston not having seen Waterford wants to spread them out a little bit, so you don't see as much of the running game that they're accustomed to, and so we'll see who adapts the quickest and who's able to make the adjustments that they need. And like you said, that Delta Esparto game, Delta getting in, you mentioned them a couple of weeks ago, the storied history that Delta has, and them being able to get back in the playoffs and kind of restore their tradition of winning and kind of advancing. And so I think, that D7 playoff should be a pretty good game too.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you've got Linden in a rematch against Bradshaw Christian. And earlier in the season, Linden travels up to Bradshaw Christian tomorrow night. I don't expect you to opine on this one too much because you got to keep your game plan close to your chest. But I see this as being a really great matchup. I think Bradshaw Christian's been tough all year. They do things the right way, but I think Linden has really put together some great wins at the end of the season that should make this a really close matchup. So again, this is one of those pick'em games. Best of luck to you, Coach. Hopefully, Linden can pull away with another playoff victory.
Yeah, we're hoping. So we're preparing. It's two different styles. Where we want to spread it out and throw it around, and they want to tighten it up and run it. So it's just gonna, again, kind of a battle of wills, and whoever's made the adjustments. It was a 30-17 game the last time we saw each other. So I would anticipate a game that's relatively close, within a score or two of each other. And we'll just, who makes the adjustments, who's able to adapt. And it's much different. The first time we played each other, it was like 104 on a Saturday afternoon at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And this week it's supposed to be mid 50s and, 7 o'clock. So I think it'll be good for both of us and to get out there and just get after it and see what happens. And kind of moving right along, Roseville travels to Oakdale. Oakdale has the bye last week, and Roseville has to win a game to get to this game. So Roseville probably not looking forward to having to face a rested Oakdale team. And I would anticipate, this, again, Oakdale doing what Oakdale does, and they're going to run the ball at you, and they're going to pressure you, and they're going to make you do what you do, and they're not going to beat themselves. So that should be a very good game.
For sure. Coach Merzon always has his team ready in the playoffs. Regardless of how the regular season went, they're always going to be tough in the playoffs.
Yeah. And then back to D7, Mariposa County travels to Vacaville Christian. We played Vacaville Christian. Tough team. I mean, we hung their only loss on them. But they're well coached. Manny Tarango out there in Vacaville has them playing pretty good football. They got a couple of pretty good linemen. They run a solid offense. Mariposa County was the team that beat Waterford and hung their only loss on them. So that probably was their qualifying win, the win that kind of was their signature win that allowed them to get into the playoffs. There's been a lot of frustration in the D7 bracket. Forest Hill ends up not getting in with an 8-2 record, even though they beat Delta head up, and then they finished ahead of Delta in the bracket. But everybody's kind of upset because Rio Vista ends up sliding into that position. But I think strength of schedule, coaches really need to pay attention to it. Sometimes you can't control what happens in your league. Just like us, we had four forfeits this season. Picking up the likes of Kimball and Fireball, and early in the season we picked up Amador and East Nick. Both of those teams are perennial playoff contenders and just had down seasons. Actually, East Nick still made the playoffs, but Amador had not a normal Amador season. So some of these teams that aren't happy with their brackets or their seedings or not making it into the playoffs, coaches, you need to schedule up. I mean, you got to understand, I think a loss against a good team is much better than a win against a bad team. So strength of schedule plays a heavy factor. And if you're playing a bunch of teams with a negative 30 strength of schedule, you're going to put yourself in a really bad spot no matter whether you win that game or not, because a win against a team like that really doesn't help you. But a loss against a Kimball has a plus 20 something rating, only helps you. Even though we took it on the chin in that game, it really helped us with our seeding and getting us a home playoff game.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we've got Ripon taking on Pioneer. Ripon at 7-4, Pioneer 8-1. I don't know a lot about Pioneer, but Ripon is another one of those teams that seems to always get it done in the playoffs, winning their first round game, obviously over series. Escalon plays Woodland. This is another one of those interesting matchups. Woodland at 9-2, Escalon at 9-1. This is gonna be a great game. I'm sure Frost is probably excited about this. Yeah. But a big game for Escalon. It's gonna be a real test for them. Then another. I mean, it just keeps the hits keep coming. Manteca, Sacramento. Hopefully, Manteca's got their injury bug stuff figured out and get these kids healthy. They're a very tough team. So is Sacramento at 9-2.
Just a little bit on that Sacramento game. That Sacramento Manteca, both of them run the ball. So if Blake's out, Blake Nicholson's healthy, Blake's our he was player of the week multiple times this season.
He's a great player.
So him being hurt the last couple of weeks has affected the end of I think they were 7-0, and I think they've lost their last 3, or they've lost 3 of their last 4. But Sacramento's got their own running game. They have this Lamar Radcliffe that's a sophomore, pretty stout, thick running back, like very physical, but also pretty fleet of foot. He can run a little bit. And then they got Naaman Brandon at quarterback, which allows them to be a little bit more balanced. So I would anticipate this game again. Here's where I think the two things might separate themselves a little bit: is Manteca being in the VOL, playing against East Union, playing against Kimball, playing against Central Catholic. Them being in that league helps them more than Sacramento being in the league that they're in. So if there's an advantage at this point, I would say it's Manteca having, the upper hand, provided that Blake's healthy. We know Lion Cologne can run a little bit there. Hudson Wyatt is their quarterback at Manteca, so he came in week 5, week 6, and help balance things out a little bit, which will put Reese back to tight end. So if Nicholson's healthy, I think this is one of the games in the area that we would be that's going to be very close, but I think it's going to be a very well played game.
Yeah, and if we were to kind of classify some of these matchups that we've already talked about in terms of weight classes for a boxing card, I think we've covered the cruiserweights and the middleweights, but now we're getting into some of the heavyweights. Rockland at 10-0, playing Sheldon at 8-3. I will say this: I don't let that 8-3 fool you. I think Sheldon's going to give them all they can handle. Rockland obviously is the favorite to win the section, but we'll see. That should be a great matchup. Patterson at 9-2. Takes on a very tough Yuba City Honkers team at 7-3. And then kind of in the Stockton area of the game that everybody's going to keep their eye on, another heavyweight battle. You got St. Mary's at 9-2 playing a very good Edison team at 9-1. This, it's easy to say, but I'm always going to defer to the old pick'em. This is going to be a great game. I think you're going to see that the lights on the scoreboard are going to be very hot because they're going to be constantly lit up. But look for two very, very good teams here. This is going to have implications, I think, onto who's going to be in the final.
Yeah, you have games this week where you have very good teams, you have very well coached teams, you have people who play within a system and those types of things. This game is much like that. St. Mary's will run their system. Edison has come a long way as far as their coaching staff and what they're doing down there. They're developing guys, but there are going to be probably, and this is, I don't even think it's a stretch, but there's going to probably be more D1 or college-bound football players in this game than almost any other game this week. So,
absolutely,
I would anticipate, like you said, I would imagine both of these teams being near 50 points. It's high 40s, low 50s, and I would expect the game, a score within the winner being within a couple scores of the team that loses this game. But I could easily see, a 52-45 score, something like that, with that last possession mattering, and who knows? I mean, I think a couple years ago, Edison had a chance to upset Folsom and needed a field goal, but didn't have a kicker at the time, and ended up having to go for it from like their 25, and it just didn't work out. But I'm sure that Booker Guyton and his coaching staff down there has probably looked for somebody within the school to find them, make sure they have that kicker in the event that the game's that tight and they need a field goal going in at the end. So
yeah, like you said, just to kind of echo, two very well coached teams, full of talent. What a great matchup.
Yeah. And as we round it out, you have Granite Bay playing Monterey Trail. Granite Bay is one of those teams that is anticipated to be very successful, and then Rio Vista going to Woodland Christian being the one in the D7 bracket. So lots of great football this week. I'll be at my game up there at Bradshaw Christian. Scott's trying to figure out if he's coming to the Linden game, if he's going to the St. Mary's Edison game, if he's going to the Central Catholic SAC game. He is not sure. He might.
Hey, there's too many good options out there. I mean, there's so many great games. I'd love to maybe go see East Union play or Manteca play, or who knows. Maybe I'll try to catch a couple of games, but I'm super excited for these teams this week. Another kind of side note that I'd like to say too is congratulations to all the student athletes this week that were able to sign their national letter of intent. Great day for you guys, to just a culmination of all the hard work coming kind of to a head, and definitely worth celebrating all of these student athletes.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, you get to follow Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and see all the kids signing. I remember when Gabby signed, and last year you had Mia sign last year, and Brooke just a few years ago. So. And then the other part, I'd like to say is that for the first time in, 17 years, Linden wins a playoff game. And, so we never really hadn't been on the other side of the field when, you win a game and the other team loses. And when their season basically is over at that point. We've had our season over in week 10 quite a bit, in the last 2 decades. But, to look over and see, and Aaron Souza and his group down there at Orastemba, class. I mean, the kids played hard. They played tough. They never gave up. I mean, to be honest, in the third quarter, I thought that game was over. They staged a little rally in the fourth quarter to get within a score. We didn't get to pick up the first down that we needed. They got the ball back with a chance to tie the game, with 2 or 3 minutes left in the game. And we get a scoop and score late, to kind of put the game away. But I have nothing but good things to say from those kids from Orastemba, Aaron Souza and his coaching staff, all the parents and supporters of that program. And at the end of the day, we coach, football, and the kids are dedicated to preparing for the season to have the opportunity to make the playoffs, and then you get to the end and it's 80 something teams or whatever out of everybody that starts actually get the opportunity to be in a playoff game. And so, the culmination of all your hard work sometimes isn't rewarded with, the result that you want, but to play hard and to walk off the field with your head held high and know that you guys, that they give a sound effort and, that the game was played clean and true. I got nothing but good things to say, and again, kudos to Orastemba on a great season.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting that you bring that up. It's something that if people are paying attention, the West Side's kind of, if you look back in the, through the 2000s, the West Side, with the exception of Patterson recently, has kind of been quiet on the football end. But you take that 33 corridor down Orastemba, Gustine, Patterson, there's a resurgence there, and look for those 3 programs to keep moving forward and keep doing big things in the future.
Yeah, all 3 of those got into playoffs this year too. So looking forward to another really good week. You can pick up most of the games are going to be on NFHS, or some of them are on the YouTube channel. Tickets, if you're going to a playoff game this weekend, tickets have to be purchased through GoFan. That's a CIF rule. It's unfortunate, I think, for a lot of people, because it's just frustrating, especially us in the rural areas that don't have the greatest cell reception. You know, Linden happens to be an area that if you don't have Verizon, you don't have service. So asking people to buy tickets at the gate, if you have AT&T or Metro, whatever service you have that's not Verizon. I mean, there was a struggle at the gate. I think at one time there were 80 or 90 people lined up in line, and that's frustrating for everybody. But
hey, another big thank you to the CIF for their master planning on screwing over the fans. Good job.
Well, next week we'll try to go ahead and get Frost back on. We'll go ahead and get Mark Santos back on. I'm confident both of those teams will advance, and so it'd be nice to get their thoughts on how the season's gone. After this week, we'll be down to 14 playoff games. There's 28 this week. There'll be 14 next week. So next week we'll only have 28 teams left in the section. So it'll be narrowing itself down relatively quickly. And you can pick up, if some curiosity about who anybody thinks is winning, you can go to calpreps.com and do projections, and they'll let you know who they think is winning, just so everybody's on the same page. They're picking us to lose 38-19, but we kind of see that score inverted. So thank you, everybody, for listening this week. Really appreciate your the follows, and everybody being retweeting and sharing stuff with us on Twitter, so we're able to stay in the know and be able to share those things with everybody that's following our program. So thank you, everybody, and we'll talk to you next week.